Go home, old man. Nobody here wants your junk. The young private sneered, pointing at the rusted metal and the folded flag in the old man's trembling hands. Around them, visitors at the military base glanced over with indifference, then quickly looked away. John Harris took a step back, breathing slowly. His tear-filled eyes dropped to the ground as he whispered in a shaky voice, "I just wanted to leave this in the right hands before I go. I don't have much time left." John Harris wakes up at 5:30 in the morning, just like he has for the past 50 years. Not because he has to, he retired over a decade ago, but because the body doesn't forget certain habits. His bare feet touch the cold, creaking wooden floor as he walks to the small kitchen, where a single cup waits for him on the time-stained sink. The house is modest. He bought it back in 1980 with the money he saved working at Johnson's Auto Shop in Aberdeen, Maryland, after coming back from Vietnam. The walls are bare, except for a faded photograph of Martha, his wife, who passed away 6 years ago, and a small wooden crucifix she once hung in the living room. After his coffee, John gets dressed in the same outfit as always, including the coat Martha gave him in the winter of 1997. In the left pocket of that coat, he always carries the same thing, a golden medal with a red, white, and blue ribbon, now worn by time, and the constant touch of his fingers. It's in that quiet routine that something inside John begins to stir, a restlessness he hasn't felt in years, as if the moment has finally come to do something he's been putting off for months. The next morning, John wakes up earlier than usual. The digital clock beside his bed projects its numbers into the darkness, but he doesn't need to look. His body knows. Somehow, it knows today is different. He gets up slowly, his joints aching from the cold seeping through poorly sealed windows. He walks over to Martha's wardrobe, he still calls it that, even after 6 years, and opens the bottom drawer. His hands search in the dark until they find what he's looking for, a small wooden box he hasn't opened in months. Inside the box, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, lies an old American flag, worn with time but folded into a perfect triangle. John lifts it with reverence, as if holding something sacred. The flag weighs more than it should for just a piece of cloth. It carries the weight of memories he'd rather keep buried, the suffocating heat of the Vietnamese jungle, the screams of wounded brothers, the awful silence that always followed the fighting. John sits on the edge of the bed and places the flag on his lap. With his right hand, he touches the coat hanging on the nearby chair. The medal is there, just as it's been for the last 50 years. A bronze star with a V for valor, a rare honor he never spoke of to anyone except Martha. Breakfast passes without taste. John chews his toast mechanically, his eyes fixed on the folded flag resting on the kitchen table. At 9 o'clock, John puts on the coat, slips the medal into the left pocket, and takes the flag in his arms. His hands tremble, not from age, but from an emotion he can't quite name. The walk to Aberdeen Proving Ground takes 40 minutes. John has never been there before, even though he's lived just a few miles from the base. All these years he's stayed away, almost as if the distant sound of military drills might awaken ghosts he's kept locked away. The main gate stands tall, flanked by white guardhouses where young soldiers keep watch. American flags wave in the autumn wind, their ropes tapping against the metal poles in a hypnotic rhythm. John approaches slowly, the folded flag pressed against his chest. He can feel his heart pounding, a wild, uneven drum beat echoing in his ears. 2 young privates, no older than 22, watch him approach, their curiosity quickly shifting into disdain. The first soldier, a young man with Mitchell stitched on his uniform, steps forward. "Excuse me, sir. This is a restricted military facility. Do you have clearance to be here?" "Good morning. My name is John Harris," John says, raising the flag and his medal slightly. "I'd like to donate this to the base as a tribute." His voice comes out weaker than he intended. Mitchell glances at his fellow soldier, a young man named Rodriguez. They exchange a smirk. "Go home, old man. Nobody here wants your junk." A small crowd begins to form. Visitors arriving for a base tour, military families, a few soldiers. They all watch John with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Whispers start to spread. Mitchell takes a step closer, chest puffed with youthful authority. "Look, sir, I don't know where you got this stuff, but this isn't the place for games. You want my advice? Go home, watch your movies on TV, and stop bothering people who have real work to do." John swallows hard. His once steady eyes now swim with tears he struggles to hold back. For the first time in 50 years he feels small, diminished, as if all the years, all the weight of memory he carries, mean absolutely nothing to the world around him. Rodriguez grabs a radio and speaks loudly, on purpose. "Base to control. We've got a situation at the main gate. Civilian disturbance, possibly mentally unstable. Needs escort for removal." The response crackles through the radio. "Control to base, copy that." John feels his legs begin to give out. The cold metal of the metal burns against his sweaty fingers. The flag in his arms feels like it weighs a ton. Around him, faces multiply, some smirking, others just uncomfortable with the scene. A woman in the crowd whispers to her husband, "Poor man. He probably has Alzheimer's. My mom had it too." The cold October wind sweeps through the base courtyard, sending dry leaves dancing around John's feet. He stands still for a moment that feels like an eternity, the flag clutched to his chest like a useless shield against the humiliation closing in around him. His fingers instinctively stroke the metal in his pocket. Bronze star with a V for valor. June 15, 1969. Tay Ninh Province, South Vietnam. The day he saved 17 men from his platoon during a Viet Cong ambush. The day his lieutenant, Thomas Patterson, looked him in the eye and said, "Harris, you just gave us a second chance to make it home." John slowly lifts his head. His eyes scan the faces around him. Young soldiers laughing, visitors looking away in discomfort, children pointing. In the reflection of the guardhouse's mirrored windows, he sees himself. A man bent with age, wearing worn-out clothes, holding objects everyone here sees as nothing more than worthless relics. "Sir," Mitchell's voice cuts the air like a blade. "I need you to leave, now." John blinks slowly, as if waking from a dream, or a nightmare. He takes a step back, trembling as he struggles to hold himself together, when every part of him wants to scream, to tell these boys who he really is, what he did, how many lives he saved while they weren't even a thought in their parents' minds. But John Harris learned long ago that some men carry their battles in medals pinned to their chest, and others carry them in the invisible scars buried deep in the soul. He's always been the second kind. "I just wanted to leave this in the right hands before I go," John murmurs, his voice so low only Mitchell, standing closest, can hear it. The words hang in the air like a confession, a farewell, a silent testament from someone who knows his time is running out and only wanted to make sure his most sacred memories found a place to rest with dignity. Mitchell frowns, something in the old man's tone making him hesitate for a moment. But Rodriguez nudges him with an elbow, whispering something about not letting the crazies take over, and the moment of humanity is lost. John turns and walks away from the gate with slow, heavy steps. Behind him, the voices begin to fade. The soldiers go back to their duties. The visitors continue their scheduled tour. The children move on to other distractions. In just a few minutes, it will be as if John Harris was never there. The walk back home feels longer than the way there. Each step echoes on the cracked pavement like a hammer striking cold steel. His hands are still trembling when he arrives. John gently sets the flag down on the kitchen table, next to Martha's photograph. For one absurd moment, he wishes she were there to hold him, to tell him he did the right thing, that he tried to honor his fallen brothers the only way he knew how. But Martha is gone. And with her, the only person in the world who truly knew who John Harris was. She was the one who carried his nightmares through stormy nights, who dried his silent tears on the anniversaries of fallen comrades, who never pushed him to speak about the war, but always knew when the memories came back to haunt him. John sinks into his recliner and closes his eyes. Outside, the world keeps spinning, unaware, unmoved, by the quiet heartache of a 78-year-old war veteran. As John rests in his recliner, trying to forget the humiliating morning, inside Aberdeen Proving Ground, General Thomas Patterson finishes a video call with the Pentagon about new testing equipment. At 74, Patterson carries the weight of 5 decades in uniform. He walks through the administrative hallways when he hears voices coming from the soldiers' recreation room. Loud laughter, mocking comments. As an experienced commander, Patterson knows young soldiers sometimes need to blow off steam. But something in the tone makes him stop. "You should have seen that crazy old man," Mitchell is saying to a group gathered around the pool table. "Showed up with a crumpled flag and a fake medal trying to play the hero." "So pathetic," Rodriguez adds, lining up his shot. "Said he wanted to leave it in the right hands. Man, I almost felt bad for the guy." "What was his name again?" Another soldier asks. "John something. Harris, I think. John Harris." The name echoes in Patterson's mind like a cannon blast. 52 years vanish in an instant, and he's back in the choking jungle of Tay Ninh, Vietnam, leading an 18-man platoon on a reconnaissance mission that turned into the worst nightmare of their lives. The Viet Cong ambush came out of nowhere, right at a muddy bend in the river. AK-47 fire rained from all directions, turning the lush forest into a hell of bullets and screams. Patterson saw 3 of his men drop within seconds, blood mixing with the red jungle mud. They were trapped, no way out, until John Harris, a skinny young private, did something Patterson still can't fully explain. Harris grabbed an M60 from a wounded comrade and charged straight into enemy fire. He just stood up and walked toward certain death, unleashing precise bursts that forced the Viet Cong to retreat long enough for the platoon to regroup. For several minutes, Harris held an exposed position under intense fire, allowing the wounded to be evacuated and the rest of the unit to mount an effective counterattack. When the battle ended, 17 men were alive because one young soldier chose to risk everything rather than watch his brothers die. Patterson never forgot those determined eyes, that eerie calm under pressure, that silent courage that needed no words. Harris received the Bronze Star with a V for Valor 3 months later, in a quiet ceremony back at the Tay Ninh base. He gave no speech. He just took the medal, nodded once in thanks, and walked back to his tent. It was the last time Patterson ever saw him. After the war, Patterson stayed in the military, rising through the ranks to become a general. Harris simply disappeared. He went home, lived a quiet civilian life, carrying his memories and scars far from any spotlight or ceremony, until today, until this morning, when the man who saved Patterson's life was mocked by soldiers who have no idea what real sacrifice looks like. "Mitchell, Rodriguez," the general's voice slices through the air like a blade. "My office, now!" The 2 soldiers practically sprint, their faces pale with fear. "Do you have any idea who you just disrespected?" Mitchell and Rodriguez exchange nervous glances. "Sir, we thought he was just some confused old—" "John Harris," Patterson cuts in, "saved 17 American lives in Vietnam, including mine. He is a real war hero." The silence is deafening. Patterson walks over to the window, staring out at the gate where, just hours earlier, one of the bravest men he ever knew was treated like garbage. "You're going to get me his address, now. Then you'd better pray it's not too late to make up for the worst display of disrespect I've seen in 50 years of military service." Patterson picks up the phone. There are calls to make, a 56-year debt to repay, and John Harris is going to get the recognition he deserves, even if it's the last thing Patterson does in uniform. It's 4 in the afternoon when John hears the rumble of engines approaching his house. Through the living room window, he sees something that makes him blink several times, wondering if he's dreaming. 2 official military vehicles pulling up in front of his home, a Humvee and a black SUV bearing the insignia of the United States Army. The doorbell rings. John walks to the door with hesitant steps and opens it. Standing there is General Thomas Patterson, in full-dress uniform, accompanied by 3 officers. Behind them, Mitchell and Rodriguez stand stiffly at attention, their faces visibly ashamed. John recognizes him instantly, even after all these decades. The face has changed, now lined with age, the hair turned white, and the uniform covered with decades of rank. But it's impossible to forget the man he saved while they waited for extraction. "Tommy?" John's voice comes out as a disbelieving whisper. "John Harris," Patterson says, his voice thick with emotion. The two men lock eyes in a moment that freezes time. 52 years melt away. They're back in that humid jungle, two young men who learned the true meaning of brotherhood under enemy fire. Patterson bows in a deep, respectful nod. "Forgive me, John. Forgive these men." He gestures toward Mitchell and Rodriguez. "They didn't know who you are, but I do." "General Patterson." John straightens his shoulders instinctively, the old military posture returning after years asleep. "Sir." "No, John, not today. Today, you're the one who deserves the honors." Patterson turns to the accompanying officers and gives a signal. They step into ceremonial formation on the small front lawn of John's house. Neighbors begin stepping out of their homes, drawn by the sight of the unusual military presence on their street. John walks back into the house and returns with the folded flag and the medal. His hands no longer tremble. There's a calmness in his movements, as if he's finally found the peace he's been searching for all these years. "Sir," John says, offering the flag and medal to Patterson, "I'd like to donate these to the base, so that future generations remember freedom comes at a price." Patterson receives them with ceremonial reverence, but then gently places them back into John's hands. "Allow me to suggest something else." Patterson turns to Mitchell and Rodriguez, still standing at attention. "Soldiers, step forward." The two young men approach hesitantly, stopping just in front of John. Their faces show a mix of shame and growing respect, emotions just beginning to settle in. "This man saved lives," Patterson says firmly. "Today we return to him the respect that time tried to erase. And you will be the first to learn a lesson that will follow you for the rest of your military careers. Never dismiss someone you don't fully know." Mitchell takes a step forward, removing his cap. "Sir, Sergeant Harris, sir, I ask for your forgiveness. We had no right to treat you the way we did." Rodriguez steps forward as well, his young eyes shimmering with genuine remorse. "Sir, we didn't know. Please forgive our ignorance." John studies the two young men for a long moment. In them, he sees the faces of soldiers he once led, young men who still needed to learn that true strength doesn't lie in arrogance, but in the humility of admitting when you're wrong. "Soldiers," John says quietly, his voice carrying the silent authority of someone who's seen hell and returned. "You did what you thought was right. That matters more than you know. But always remember, every man carries invisible scars. You never know what battles someone has fought." General Patterson steps forward, his voice rising over the quiet street now lined with curious neighbors. "John Harris, on behalf of the 1st Battalion, 5th Infantry, of the men who got to see their families again because of your courage, and of every American soldier who has ever served with honor, I invite you to be our guest of honor at next week's Veterans Day ceremony." John nods slowly, a small but genuine smile appearing on his face for the first time in years. "It would be an honor, General." The following week, John Harris walks across the main stage at the Veterans Day ceremony at Aberdeen Proving Ground. He wears his best suit, the same one he wore to marry Martha, and carries the flag he kept for 52 years. In the audience, hundreds of soldiers, veterans, and families rise in a standing ovation. Mitchell and Rodriguez sit in the front row, their uniforms immaculate, their expressions transformed by the lesson they'll never forget. John steps up to the microphone. "Today, I give this flag and medal not as John Harris, but in the name of the brothers I couldn't save, and for every soldier, active or not, who carries their battles in silence." He hands the flag to General Patterson, who accepts it with full military honors. Outside, the first snow of winter begins to fall over Maryland, covering the world in a blanket of white and quiet new beginnings. It was that winter when John Harris finally found rest. But he left knowing his years of silence had at last found a voice. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow I have another story especially for you.